episode of Why Not Have a Drink with Chris and Tom. We both got to watch Deadpool and Wolverine this weekend and enjoyed the hell out of it. So we decided to drop you, dear listeners, a lightly edited, unscripted discussion of what we thought and a quick look behind the scenes. When we drop in that beer can sound effect, it's a sound effect. It's a recording that I cut in after the fact, or Chris does. But tonight, oh no, that's going to be live. That's going to be for real.
We won't be spoiling anything right now, but we will be pretty soon. So here is our top line takeaway. It's awesome, and it's the Fox Films Endgame. And while those films had a smaller scale than Endgame, so does this, yet it makes it no less satisfying. So go see it in good conscience. I'll probably be seeing it again this week.
Fully agree with that. It is everything you expect of a Deadpool film. It's frankly everything you would expect of a Deadpool and Wolverine team-up film. It's profane, it's violent, it's very funny. It's really enjoyable to see Hugh Jackman play as not even a straight man, like a board. Like, he's so straight. Like, it's incredible. Play that role off of Reynolds' Deadpool. It's fun, and it really...
The fun between the main actors very much came through, and I think that's good.
And we'll get to it with some of our complaints about the film, because we will have a few, but that energy really smooths over some edges that in another film without those two would really kind of punish the film as a whole.
Well, and before we get to the spoilery part, I want to start off with a confession, Tom. I had not watched the movie Logan until Friday afternoon when I crammed it in before going to see Deadpool and Wolverine. But Chris, you might exclaim, how can you be the ex-nerd you are and not have seen the cinematic send-off of the most popular comic book character outside of Iron Man? Well, while I'm normally the one who tries to find something to like about properties and not dwelling on things I don't like other than Bill Mantlo, I'm going to have to say something that isn't positive. I wasn't a fan of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. His performance and all that is perfectly fine. It was the Wolverine he portrayed that I did not find compelling compared to the one I had gotten to know in the comics. So I had skipped Logan. I skipped the last Phoenix movie as well, which 20 years ago would have been utterly unheard of to me at that age. But in my cranky old manness, I kind of checked out of the X universe later on. But I did watch New Mutants and enjoyed it more than most people, apparently.
I will also say that one of the things that you despise about the Jackman Wolverine is that he's not smaller than me. It's not Wolverine if he isn't a short king in your book. On which note, now is the time that anyone avoiding spoilers should step away. We'll give you a little music bumper to hit pause and come back to us once you've seen it.
Welcome back to the spoilery part. First, the complaints. And you should really expect this one from us, but there was no Alpha Flight. Alas, it wasn't to be, but boy, if any project could have pulled it off, Tom, it was this one.
Disney, will you please give Reynolds and Jared Keeso a few million Canadian dollars and let them cook? Because I'd like it. I mean, that's my argument. I'd fucking like it. It'd be great. It'd be fun. Why not? Let them do it.
Look, if they can sell Rocket Raccoon and the Guardians of the Galaxy and make them like top tier Marvel superheroes, they can make Alpha Flight top tier superheroes. Because let me tell you, in my book, Guardians of the Galaxy is about at the level of Alpha Flight, in the pre-2010 range, in the old school Marvel world of rankings and orderings. I would put them at roughly similar. But everyone has their different tastes, and wouldn't the world be boring if we were all the same?
I would also argue just that, a motley band of folks in space is really not that dissimilar in terms of popularity or inherent popularity than like Canadians. So,
Are you saying that Canada is as cold and harsh as space?
No, I'm saying Canada is actually colder and harsher. So it's all the more impressive that Alpha Flight's as functional as it is.
Moving on to my next complaint, not enough Colossus. Because the Deadpool movie Colossus is just fantastic. He's always been a favorite character of mine, and to see him so well realized and with love on the screen was really fun over the last two movies.
I mean, I would say there is a solid argument that in all of the movies that have had X-Men in them, whether it's cameos or actual X films, that Colossus might be the best realized. Like it gets his humor, it gets like the overwhelming presence, it gets so much of what makes Colossus in the comic Colossus. I mean, like his almost unrelenting psychotic like positivity
Niceness. Yeah.
as it like pertains to fucking Deadpool of all people. I mean, it's all there, and so yes, it was fantastic. Like, he was a highlight of the first two films, and he's here, but there are a lot of characters that aren't quite here.
There's enough going on and everything that I don't feel his absence the way that I felt Luis's absence in Ant-Man 3, because Ant-Man 3 needed Luis. Like, I don't care how the hell you got him into the microverse or the quantum realm. If you put Luis into that movie, it would have done 20% better.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point and argument, and
It's science, Tom.
it is in fact science or Scientology. He's a Scientologist.
Oh, I. Why do you say such things? There were too many fucks in the movie, Tom. It was excessive. It really felt it almost felt forced at times. And I know it's a silly thing, but whatever.
It's also interesting because most of those fucks were coming from Wolverine, and I think that's why it felt a little forced, because it was coming from the guy that was just like angry and grumpy, so it sounded like it needed to be like an angrier fuck than it was. But whereas when with Deadpool, and he's saying it, he's usually doing it for comic effect, so it just changes the tone of it a bit.
Now, you said that you didn't like the length, that you felt the back half was dragging.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like, yes, I feel like the first half was really bouncing around a lot, so it kept the action moving. But once it got a little bit more into plot land, it just it felt a little creaky at moments, especially because like at that point it's trying to justify the progression by the logic of what's taking place, and some of it doesn't make sense.
Are you demanding consistency from a Deadpool
Well,
movie?
but this is the thing, is that like they're setting it up that way by how they get into it. I mean, we're not even going to really talk about the TVA's presence and all this, and how that seems to be how they're
Yeah, we're
handling the
not really touching
multiverse.
on
And
like
I mean,
MCU and impacts and things.
we might talk about it a little bit at the end, but like this is very lightly scripted in terms of how we're going to do it. There is a starting point that they kind of quickly get to shenanigans, because the starting point doesn't entirely make sense, but once they get back to that starting point and kind of circling back around to get things going and get things figured out, that's where the kind of the length of it plods a little bit after that. But it's still fun. Like, and there are enough set pieces throughout that it actually works. It still works. It's still a very fun movie. It's just, I don't know. I felt like it could have been 10-15 minutes shorter.
Now, I felt that way about the last Spider-Verse movie, that the last 25, 30 minutes, that I was kind of like, all right, this has been a lot of movie, guys. You're cramming a lot of movie into this. This is getting along. And my wife told me that she thought it was perfect. Like, every minute of it, she was just riding along, building the tension. But I had seen the twist coming, 30 minutes ahead of time. So for me, a lot of that felt like a long back half. And for Deadpool and Wolverine, I kind of feel the other way around, that it starts off very madcap and establishing kind of the Bugs Bunny rules that Deadpool operates by, and kind of not janky, but I felt like once they settled in and met up with the other characters in the void, that's where some of the emotional payoff was happening. And I appreciated that time to make it feel like something important instead of just another adventure.
I think I should be more specific about the time frame. I think that once they leave the void is where it kind of gets a little longer in the tooth than it needed to be. Like, I think even though that's probably even only that the last third. Like, I just feel like that's the part where like it just tonally shifts a bit, because everything in the void is delightful.
Yeah, and I was thinking of the void as being the part that you were talking about, and I
No,
don't
no,
recall the outside the void part being that long. So, all right, well, yeah, there you go, listener.
it's also just perception, that just that's how it felt to me at the time. I'll also say, with regards to the Spider-Verse one, I didn't know that it was going to be a two-parter, so I was watching it like, how the fuck are they going to resolve this? And then when it cuts, and
TikTok,
my
guys,
yeah, well,
TikTok.
exactly. And then when it ended the way it did, I looked. Both my boys were with me, and they turned and looked at me with their eyes wide, like, like they couldn't believe it was about to what's
Oh,
happening.
they
So
they got their own Infinity War experience.
it was pretty great. It was really like fun to see that on their faces.
When Infinity War came out, my youngest had like just been born, so my wife and I traded off taking our other kids. So I took one kid to the second show, but she took the other one to the first one. So when we crossed in the doorway, I was expecting a lot of excitement and happiness from them, and they just look at me ashen face and they said, "You're gonna love it."
We were about to die and salute you and shit.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, so I think that's most of our complaints, and the other ones will kind of come up as we like chat about some other elements. I did want to actually though call back to Logan real quick. Your reaction to like Jackman's Wolverine, I get, and some of the elements I absolutely agree with. Others I don't.
Look, people, it's not all height based, but this is not about my objection to it. I'm just kind of putting a marker in there. It's not just the height.
It's mostly the height.
It's not mostly the height, Tom. You're just sensitive, my short king.
Thanks. That's all I really needed out of this entire podcast. We can just cancel the whole thing now. I'm good. Got that on tape.
It was your dastardly plan from the beginning.
This has been my design. Your sister would love that I just made a Hannibal reference. So,
oh god.
Anyway, I like Logan a lot. I also find it interesting in that movie pulls a decent bit from Old Man Logan. It's by no means the same setup, but it has a lot of the same tone to it. I think. I mean, the brokenness of him at that stage, those sorts of things. And also the sort of the Western element to it. What's interesting to me about that is that Old Man Logan as a comic, I think happens because of Jackman's Wolverine. I think that Jackman the way that Jackman's Wolverine functions, how much of a heavy he plays, how life is constantly breaking him, I think is how they end up writing that kind of a story of him walking away and then becoming violent again and all that. So, I mean, I feel like it's a bit of a, and this is just like a very off the cuff thought, maybe not, but I feel like it's a little bit of the snake eating its tail. The Jackman's Wolverine leads to Old Man Logan, leads to Logan, and so forth. But is that the right metaphor? I mean, it is now.
No, it's not. It wasn't then, and it's not now. There you go. We got a new one. I like the Old Man Logan motif. I fucked up in the past and put it all away behind me and had to start a new life as a normal guy. I appreciate that this version of Old Man Logan didn't involve Bruce Banner having kids with his cousin She-Hulk.
Yeah, that was horrifying.
Yeah, and it was surprisingly central to the story.
Incredibly central to the story.
Depressingly central to the story.
Yup.
Next up in this issue of the writer's barely disguised fetish.
Ugh. And then there's a whole Vort element too. Like, it's just all messed up.
Yeah, there was a lot of Old Man Logan that keeps me from saying, oh yeah, it's fantastic, you should check it out. Like, there's some cool stuff if you really dig Wolverine. It's just not generally the Wolverine I dig. That's all. Yeah. I really like the Wolverine that you and I have been talking about on the podcast because it's fun. It works for me. It's a different character that's not the overexposed 90s, the central linchpin to everything that's going on around him, that like the Mary Sue of all the movies.
Which is also, I mean, which is something that they were definitely trying, I think, at times in some of the Wolverine movies to pull in, like to kind of expand the character. But for whatever reason, they just couldn't get away from that idea of Wolverine they'd established in like X-Men and X2, and he couldn't grow in a way. And that's absolutely what the Wolverine we've talked about when we've talked about him. He has been on a journey. He has grown. He has changed. And that's, I don't know, man, that's cool.
It seems like Jackman's journey and growth have ended when he gets to the school. You know, yeah. Like that's it. Like, now he is Wolverine, and that's all there is to it. Beyond those parts, I'm glad that they started over with a completely new Wolverine that is an absolute fuck up. It's not even Old Man Logan who had something bad happen to him. He just fucked up.
Yep.
He just wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing, and it wasn't big and it wasn't dramatic. It was just made the wrong choice at the wrong time because he was the wrong guy. You know, and I really appreciate the value of that kind of narrative of giving him a chance to start over.
It's a good use of the multiverse. Like, if there is this multiverse, there are going to be universes in which the heroes are not the heroes, where the heroes are pariahs, where the heroes have completely fucked up their lives and other people's lives, you know? And
it's probably more likely to happen. I mean, look at Alpha Flight.
Imagine the universe where Alpha Flight is the premier superhero team in the entire universe. They're the ones that took down Thanos. They're the ones that Galactus runs from after he pisses himself in the middle of eating a planet. Like, that universe exists. That within the context of the multiverse, that universe has to exist.
Oh my God, I want to read something from that universe so hard just to watch. Like I don't even know who gets dropped into that universe. I just want to see somebody get dropped into that universe and have to look around and be like, but wait, you?
Yes, I want this so badly now. I can't believe I just talked about this thing, and it's just never. We're just not okay. Anyway, moving on.
Well, since the universes are numbered based on like the month and the year of when they premiere in a comic book, I guess that universe where Alpha Flight is the world's premier superhero team would be like 7024 or something like that. So we'll have to double check. This is not a researched episode, folks. We're going to double check that, but we're putting a pin in it. We're penciling in 7024 Alpha Universe.
Pretty sure they could tell this is not a heavily scripted episode, but moving on. Some other things that we really enjoyed.
Yeah, everything's great. Everything else is great. Everything it was delightful. I can't gush enough. I had such a great time.
And that's the fun part, right? It was just fun. Like we can nitpick.
There were so many characters that we knew and hadn't seen in a long time, and even just the Deadpool family. We haven't seen them since the second movie. Like, they're not popping up and doing other things. It was nice to see Negasonic Teenage Warhead and Yukio. They're adorable together. And Sugar Bear, Tom.
And Sugar Bear ends up like being like the Deus Ex Machina twice in this movie. Twice.
He is the hero of the movie.
It's amazing. It's so good. And Shatterstar.
He saved Deadpool's soul. That's what Sugar Bear did.
Yes.
Shatterstar, I was not thrilled with that incarnation of it, but you know what? I'm glad that he makes Wade happy, so I'm glad that he's there. Variant Wolverines, my absolute favorite, as everyone will be sure of, Short King Wolverine. God damn, I wanted to see more of that guy. I wanted the rest of the movie to have been a like Rickroll of all of us, and Hugh Jackman was playing Short King Wolverine for the rest of the movie, and they honestly treated John Byrne's Wolverine as that. That would have...
It's really like they even sized down his arms. Like it was incredible.
He looked like Puck. It was awesome.
It was really great. I mean, maybe Jackman stops being Wolverine, just becomes like a forced perspective of himself and plays Puck moving forward. That's actually not a terrible idea.
I've had and acted on worse.
I've been there for some of that.
Age of Apocalypse Wolverine was great because he got to club Deadpool with his stump. And it reminded me of in the Age of Apocalypse Weapon X issues, and I forget who he's fighting, but the guy taunts him after like cutting off Wolverine's good hand, saying, "What are you going to do? Stump me to death?" And he pops his claws through the cap and kills the guy, who was, I'm sure, very surprised.
Seeing the Hulk reflected in Wolverine's claws was it was a nice touch. Also probably saved them a little bit on the CGI budget, I'd imagine. But
I hadn't thought about that angle, but you're absolutely right.
That whole sequence, it's so brief, but it's such a completist approach to this whole thing, right?
And yet they left out Department H and the Hudsons. And you know what? It's been a long time since I had my one viewing of Wolverine Origins that I really found unpleasant. But I believe the Hudsons are in that movie.
Yeah, as the old couple that takes him in.
Wolverine was in an old throuple.
I mean, Wolverine is a man of diverse tastes.
There's a bit more Deadpool in Wolverine than people admit. Literally.
Jesus Christ. Folks, I'm going to tell you right now, you might not ever hear this episode. We will see how this goes from here. So some reflections on the experience. My eldest was with me. He's 14, so he obviously loved the hell out of all of it.
You took him to an R-rated movie, Tom?
Very much so. He also has enough nerdy knowledge, which I'm going to claim as a parenting win, to absolutely lose it when Chris Evans bait and switched into Johnny Storm, as did the rest of the theater. Like I was in a good theater. Folks were cracking up at some really good stuff. Some people were cracking up at the deep cuts. No one else laughed at Liefeld's Only Feet shoe store.
Oh God, I was the only one that laughed in my theater, and it was full, every seat.
You know what? That was for us. That was literally for like degenerates like us.
I was in the most mayonnaise flavored suburban movie theater environment that you can imagine, and it was pretty dull and lifeless, and I was wishing for a bit more spirit for a movie like this. But my audience, there were a few people who did clap and cheer at 2 points, and they were when Dogpool ran through the portal, and when Wolverine put on his mask.
The Wolverine mask moment was pretty outstanding.
I hadn't realized that we hadn't seen that yet. Like, I hadn't even thought of it, you know? Like,
Yeah.
Wolverine never wears the mask. So why would I ever think about it? Because Hugh Jackman's Wolverine doesn't do that. So it was nice to have something else.
It was just really fun to have this be such a superhero movie. You know, like this is like their full costume. What they're doing is just like they're like on the fly coming up with a plan. Total hijinks are ensuing. It's just it's just a really enjoyable experience.
It was a comic book story that they put onto film in a way that was satisfying on film. Well, that leads us over to the other superhero cameos I wanted to talk about. That's Elektra and Blade. Which one do you want to do first, Tom?
Let's do Blade first, actually.
Okay. Well, you know, you and I have a long history with Blade. I remember we saw Blade 2 together in the theaters, and to this day, Blade 2 is the best video game I've ever seen as a movie.
It's absolutely incredible. It does not seem now like 4D chess to put Guillermo del Toro in charge of like a superhero movie, or especially one that's got like that's Blade, that's got like all the
It's a horror movie.
It's a horror movie, but it's also a superhero movie, so he can do whatever he wants. He's got this incredible style to it. It's still some of the best action in any superhero movie that's ever been made. And that came out what, like 2001?
What I remember was that I forgot my glasses when we left to go to that movie, and so the whole movie was a little bit fuzzy, and apparently from what I've heard about the CGI of it, I wasn't really missing much.
There's one specific sequence where they're fighting where you can tell it is CGI'd, but that's the only time that happens, and you can kind of allow for it because the rest of it's so strong.
So anyway, clearly, Tom and I have a lot of deep love for Blade, and when Wesley Snipes as Blade appeared, I was just over the moon. It was, oh man.
And to build off of your as you described it, mayonnaise theater experience.
Oh God, I can't imagine. Yeah.
I live in Chicago. I live in the South Side. I live in Hyde Park, and this is the movie theater I grew up going to, and we're the only white folks in the theater most of the time. That's partially because of our movie tastes, but that's also just because that's the demographic for the theater. So this is a almost entirely black audience who all of a sudden, like Wesley fucking Snipes walks out as Blade, and most of the folks in that theater could be my kids, so they didn't have the experience of seeing him as Blade in the theater. So there he is in his glory with a little bit of gray in the goatee.
Oh, so stylish. It was great.
He looked amazing. And some of those kids may or may not know the backstory of Ryan Reynolds and Wesley Snipes and how they kind of hated each other on the set of Blade Trinity. So it's like even wilder in that context. There's a great like slap at Marvel in that exchange. Do you want to relay it?
It was wasn't it? I'm the only Blade there will ever be, or something like that. It was just a clear declaration that Marvel doesn't have their shit together. I loved it.
It was so good. There's an earlier moment in the movie where Blind Al was begging Deadpool for some white powder, and he was like, that's the one thing they told us we couldn't talk about. And they then proceed to use every possible slang term for cocaine I've never encountered before. And we went to a
rich school. Yeah.
We went to a preppy New England college. We've heard most of them, so...
and also getting one more iteration of some motherfuckers always trying to ice skate uphill. Oh God, it was just so satisfying.
It felt good. It felt right. It felt right. It felt good.
Elektra was a nice surprise because I remember watching the Elektra movie and wondering what the fuck I had just watched. You know, the Daredevil was perfectly enjoyable. It was a fine movie. The director's cut is much better. So if you have access to it, I highly recommend checking out the director's cut, folks. It has some really cool use of his powers, helps flesh out the story. It's a better movie than what we got in the theater.
In the interest of giving Elektra some more of her due, she comments that Daredevil is dead. And Deadpool goes, oh, I'm so sorry. She goes, it's fine. Like, it's just one of the fun things with this movie is that it is almost perfect. Like, and this has been true of most of the Deadpool movies, but this one's like the final form of it, as it were. It operates knowing its place in the larger pop culture conversation, and it's speaking to that at almost all times, and it just does it really, really well.
Well, and it does it really well, and you and I find this immensely satisfying. But the thing is that I think that it's not going to age well precisely because of that in 20 years, no one's going to get that line. And I'm not using this as a knock. It's just, it's a different kind of catching the zeitgeist and really nailing things down. and it's good. It's delightful. And I don't know that this type of ride. I mean, we both got kids. We've had to take them through the ride of Marvel movies to get them on board. Like, there's not going to be something that makes this satisfying. You can totally take the ride, and when you get to end game, you'll be crying when Cat picks it up. But there's not going to be a path where you can take the Deadpool ride and have this movie pay off the way that it did for audiences who see it now.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that.
How much are people going to know about the Fox split and about these movies versus that movies? And
So I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, because I think that if you're watching Deadpool and Wolverine, even if you're watching it 20 years from now, you're watching it having watched Deadpool 2, knowing a good bit about like where this weird freaking film fits in all these things. Like if you're watching Deadpool and Wolverine completely out of order, out of context, yeah, very little of it's going to make any kind of sense. Some of it's just going to be hysterical because it's just funny, but a lot of the jokes, like 90% of the jokes, you're not going to get in the first place. Knowing that like Electro walks on the screen, and I don't know, like you're watching it on Amazon Prime and the X-ray function comes up and immediately like gives you the download. And that's also just,
oh, I hadn't thought about that.
like, it just like you can quickly figure out where some of these beats are coming from, or you go into it knowing it in the first place. In literature, one of the things that people screw up all the time is when they try to replicate what an interaction on a particular particular form of communication looks like on the page, where they get too deep into the weeds of like, this is what a Twitter conversation sounds like, or these kids are, or they drop in like, these kids are using Twitter in order to like make it seem relevant. And that always sucks, and that always ages poorly. But the ones that do it right are the ones that get the idea of platform. They get the idea of this is how kids communicate, and it's platform agnostic. And I think there's a certain kind of meta commentary, meta engagement that these movies do that actually just sort of, it's simply meta. It works no matter what the context is, no matter however you're watching this, because it knows you're only walking into it to watch it, to engage with it, because you're already engaging with these other things.
I think that's a valid point.
I'm glad that you found that to be a fair point, Chris. I mean, that's all I
I am the arbiter of all things, after all, Tom.
This is really just what I want out of our relationship. But now that I'm using my in touch with my feelings voice, what are some of the there were some good emotional beats in this movie, but I'm curious, and you mentioned that in your text. You saw this before I did, so you didn't give anything away. There's just some light information that you offered, but there was definitely some things that hit you right in the feels. So I'm kind of curious what those were.
I liked seeing Wade and Vanessa's matured relationship, the mature way that they broke up. I mean, just getting to see it like that, man, I don't think I've had a breakup that was that mature. You know what I mean? And then the way that she was still there for him at his birthday party. That's good. They're co-parenting Wade's cancer, I guess, or whatever. I don't know, but they're doing a great job of it, and good for them. And I was really pleased to see that even though she got fridged, and their relationship is weird to begin with, I always felt like once he got his diagnosis and she snaps into, all right, we're going to take care of this mode, I really felt like that was both of them growing up. And I was pleased to see that the way that they handled this, instead of having I have to fight to save the universe for the woman I love, I'm glad that they were able to subvert that in a way that doesn't undo the character development that they've spent so much time building up. So I felt like that was unnecessarily deep.
Throughout the movie, he's not arguing to save his timeline just for Vanessa.
Yeah, it's just his people.
He's saving it for his world, which are 9 people. And he emphasizes that these are my people. This is
if there's 8
world.
billion people who benefit from this as well, great. If you think that's important, good for you. But all I care about are these 9. Right. That's it. So if I got to save all 8 billion to do it, I will.
And frankly, that's in some ways, that's a much more recognizable emotion, right? Like, look, I can notionally say I want to save everything. I want all this. I've got a very healthily sized group of people that I care about and that I interact with. But I also will say that I want a lot of things fixed before my kids. And for your kids, like, that's top line. That's kind of where I'm at. And if everyone else benefits, great. It's a much more human approach and reaction to the situation than you kind of get with some of the, I don't know. It's what makes Superman sometimes feel even more alien than just
Yeah.
his abilities, right?
I think that Elektra expressly telling us that they were there to get their ending was surprisingly moving to me. I'm a sucker for corny done well. That's why I like Alpha Flight, or any comics really. They're all corny. It's just when they're done well, they really hit. And I thought that was neat. It was nice to get to say a send off to these characters that we met and we cared about, and then disappeared. As comics fans, we're not used to doing that. They always come back. What do you think about the behind the scenes footage at the end credits with the Time of Your Life playing?
It caught me off guard.
Me too. I was not. It caught me flat footed.
Well, and then I couldn't pretend to remember what the cuts were, but when it cut away from being about X-Men, I think the next cut was to Fan 4. And when it started moving through all of those properties and kind of touching on the majority of them, I was like, that's where I was like, oh my God, like this was a universe in its own weird little way. And
It was a different way of telling these stories than we've experienced for almost 15 years now.
yeah.
You just don't do that anymore. You do it like this, but that doesn't mean we didn't like it like that then.
And also the Marvel universe, as it exists now, is a phenomenon of our adult lives. It is something that has been 2010 or before 2010. I think Iron Man came out
2008.
in 2008. So that was 2 years before I had my first kid. But I was 2 years away from having my first kid. I was married. Whereas these films, we were in high school when they started.
For some of them,
Like,
yeah. Well, no, I guess X-Men was college, so they all hit in our college age. So we had them on DVD. We would sit around drinking beer in the common room,
sure, but
watching these on.
It was a very different phase of our lives. And so to see this footage, to see them look so young, to see Hugh Jackman not be
like a baby.
He looks like a baby. He's also like, and he's made comments about this, that like he felt that he was not in the right shape to be Wolverine in the first movie, and that like by the end of the movie he like worked himself into like closer to the shape, but he was not
he was not huge jacked man.
He was not huge Jackman. He was not deadlifting obscene amounts of weight,
and that became part of his character, of the Wolverine. And boy, it's a different direction than I would like to see the character taken. That's all. I will stop shitting in your cereal.
I almost need like a version of the Mantlo counter going in this episode. But yeah, so I mean, just to see them so young, see like babyface Chris Evans as Johnny Storm the first time around.
All right, I'm going to say it. I did not hate that first Fantastic Four movie. Is it great? No, it's a product of its time. But you know what? All my kids have watched it. One of my kids will still refer to me about how sad she feels whenever she sees Thing trying to pick the ring up off the road. Because, that's a really sad moment. It's goofy with the goofy glove and everything else that's going on. But you know what? It's fine. It's fine. It's fine for an early 2000s superhero movie. That's my hill. I'm going to die on it, Tom.
I fully agree with you. And I'm not looking for us to go any further. Hey, Teeny. It's nice to...
Hello, Teeny. Thanks for joining us. You did not see the movie, so you can get the fuck out.
Yeah, well, she's pissed about that. That's why she's yelling at you.
No, she's pissed she missed the snacks.
Well, I'm going to put this out there. We don't need to go on about it any further. I think they got exactly half the casting of that Fantastic Four, the four, correct?
I will give you 3/4. And we'll leave it there.
And we're not going to say what we think, who's what. We're just going to put that out in the ether and leave it.
Everyone knows who the one we agrees on is, but they're all going to wonder who the one we differ on is. But on the subject of the Fantastic Four, I loved seeing the Fantastic Car in Deadpool and Wolverine. Oh man, it was a real goddamn Fantastic Car, Tom. It was round. It made no sense. It didn't follow any laws of physics. It was perfect.
Was it a Fantastic Car that Namor and Invisible Woman were in when they got shot?
There's our Alpha Flight connection. Yeah,
there we go. All comes back to the flight.
I mean, technically, I believe it's one of the detachable pods of the Fantastic Car and not the main body of it. So anyway, on the Endgame bit, this did feel like it was a summing up, which is kind of weird because all of the properties that are referenced, like Fantastic Four and Elektra and Blade, they were completely siloed away from each other. Like nobody was trying to create a cinematic universe back in the day. So to have it here in Deadpool of all places, it's to have that be the end cap. That's both fascinating and weird.
Yeah, it's also so very fitting, right? Deadpool as a franchise could not exist within the Marvel universe, Marvel being Disney at this point. You know, like it can't come up that way. And a lot of the choices made in some of those, like, I don't think that this version of the Marvel universe could possibly have done Blade in any of those iterations. It wouldn't have gone in those directions. So
I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. An MCU Blade would have to, by necessity, look very different and probably be way less scary. Like I remember
yep.
using Blade as like the first scary movie for one of my older kids who wanted to watch a vampire movie. And I was like, look, there are way worse vampire movies for you to watch than Blade. Okay. At least Blade takes out most of the sexuality of the vampire metaphor.
Or at least what sexuality there is not enticing in the same way, I would say. There really is a warmth and love to how all these characters are treated in this movie. I mean, they're not just there for like lulls. I mean, they are absolutely there for that, but they're not just there for that. And dovetailing with that endgame idea, this is like, I mean, and also what Elektra was, asking for. This is giving them a send off of sorts and furthering their characters. Hell, Pyro is still a scheming douchebag, the same
I
he
did
was in.
not recognize him as the movie started. Like it took me a while to figure that out as it was going on, but then once I did, I was like, "Oh my god, they found that guy! I'm glad he got work."
Yeah, yeah.
I have no idea who the actor is. He's probably been in like a bunch of things, but I am not hip to the whys. You know.
Well, the actor's name is Aaron Stanford. He's had some work. I don't know what he's had lately, but
Anyway, back to Pyro.
so Pyro is still a scheming douchebag like he was in the X films, but he's also able to handle the Human Torch. Like he snuffs out the Torch's flame. So like he's also powerful. The ethos of this podcast, in many respects, is to treat these works seriously because someone took the time to make them, and much more importantly, they all matter to someone. And there's more than a bit of a kernel of that in this movie, of actually like giving a shit about these characters because, I don't know, they give a shit about the characters. In one of the end credit bits where they're cutting in behind the scenes stuff, they have Ryan Reynolds talking about being Wade Wilson in X-Men Origins Wolverine and how they totally fuck the Deadpool character in that movie. But he's talking about this character and how he's like, he has this goofy smile on his face about like, I would kind of like to play this character someday in like his own movie. And the man willed it to happen. And I don't know. I think that feeling, that emotion, and that care is actually present in this profane, gory, violent, absolutely bizarre movie.
Let's move on to some final thoughts, Tom. My final thought on this is going to be this movie ranks up with Star Trek the Motion Picture for showcasing a total smoke show of a bald chick. And that was a surprise to me. But here we are. And just like a kid me watching STMP, it's confusing.
The actress played Diana, Princess of Wales, in the Crown series on Netflix. So,
Huh. Yeah. Lady Deadpool also taught me something about myself.
yeah, that's complete bullshit. You already knew that about yourself.
Knew it and embraced it, Tom. So, TVA, multiverse stuff, do you have any thoughts on that as we wrap up?
I think we both have some very mixed thoughts on how the multiverse is going to work in the larger Marvel universe and how they're using it. In other conversations, you've made some, I think, a really one in particularly good point, but some good points in general about the multiverse, but in comics in general. But well, if you want to expand on that here, I think that's a good place.
Which good point was that you liked?
That sometimes it sucks.
Yeah, I've been reading comic books for a long time, and when you are invested emotionally in characters that you don't own, that are being produced for other people's profit, you have to learn to take the parts you like and to just leave the parts you don't like. So I guess that's a fancy way of saying, look, guys, sometimes comics sucks. I've been reading the 1993 Marvel Comics crossover Infinity Crusade because it intersects with later Alpha Flight, and I was really confused when I was reading those issues, and now I'm going back and doing it. This was my primo comics reading time, and I have never heard of this crossover because the X-Men didn't feature in it and it didn't move into their books. But I got about halfway through trying to do this crossover, and all of the tie-ins to try to get a big picture look of it before I put it down. And I've read 3 books on my Kindle since I put it down, because it's 1993 comics wide crossover in Marvel. It sucks. Like, sometimes comics suck. You have to get used to riding the wave here of, you're not always going to get the story you want, and it's not always going to be done as well as you want. So if you're a fan of this, run with it, okay? Just keep looking for something to like, and don't just focus on the stuff that you hate. And that's what I feel like a lot of the criticism of the multiverse is. It's not inherently about how things are being handled. It's being used as a stalking horse for a bunch of other things. And if you spend your time talking about the stuff you don't like, I don't think that you ever had to live through the early 90s of reading comics, guys, because boy, sometimes this sucks.
I think it's a really great point. I mean, I think ultimately the multiverse, any of it, it's about the stories that are being told. And we were talking earlier about like my complaints about the length of the movie, but it doesn't change the fact that I really like this movie. I really enjoyed the hell out of it. I probably love it if I like this movie a ton, because even if I feel like the pacing was a little bit odd and off at times, it still did what it needed to do. It worked. And so like, it's really more a question of story and that. And also, yeah, we're if you're investing in the universe, in all this, then sometimes it's not going to be great. And frankly, the siloed nature of the 20th Century Fox superhero universe is the way that the comics used to work. They all existed in the same universe, except that Peter Parker would be facing down some New York ending threat, and the Fan Four were nowhere to be seen. And the Fan Four were trying to
They were
save
2 blocks away facing their own world ending threat that nobody else knew about.
that no one else knew about. Like, that is how these things had to work, and occasionally they crossed over. And for all sorts of synergistic reasons, money, all, like, it wasn't just money. It was a type of storytelling that made sense. The MCU went in a cohesive manner. But now they have so many goddamn characters that do so many different things that's spinning out. And some people,
I think that Fox did a very different thing with their superheroes, and Marvel did a very different thing with it. And they have both seen how that can work, because Fox just got shown how that can work by Deadpool and Wolverine. But the MCU also has its own drawbacks. When you try to tie everything in like this, there's a reason that the comics weren't run that way. Maybe there is a benefit to having, phase 1 style where there's some silos, and then you only come together when you need to, and then you bounce back into your silo, instead of having everything being coordinated at that level. But you know what? All this is going to be decided by people who make more than we will ever make in our entire lives in a year.
which goes back to your basic point, and very salient point. Sometimes it's going to suck, and that's fine, because it's not always going to suck, and you're going to find the joy and the things that you want out of it along the way. And just keep that in mind and keep that balanced.
My last point that I want to make on this is I want the show notes to properly reflect that in this episode, Tom makes the case that 20th Century Fox did better than Marvel in terms of creating a
100%
universe.
did not make that case, you son of a bitch.
You know what? When you're editing and you play it back, I want you to listen to it, and you can decide what to do with it then, okay?
Fine. Well, one last thing we need to touch on.
Oh, I know. Yeah, there's one thing we forgot to do, Tom.
And it is something that does not suck.
That's right, folks. We're talking about Gambit, because boy, was that a treat. He was one incomprehensibly speaking yet smooth speaking motherfucker. It was Jim Lee's Gambit brought to life. Just amazing. Wow.
It was absolutely incredible.
He was a little bulky for Gambit, but that's a very minor point, because he pulled off the character so well with that ridiculous accent. He brought the Claremontian accent to life.
His hair, I don't know how your hair can start so far. Like, it was like below his ear where like the part line started underneath that mask. It was incredible. Like, not even a mask, like whatever you would call the thing that goes around his entire.
It's called a head buttress.
Yeah, sure. I believe you. It just, and even when his powers turned on, they were so like kitschy. Like they were so bright purple and almost didn't look like they paid for good CGI.
Oh, no, it was
but
great.
That's perfect for Gambit. That's so exactly how it would be.
And he made the bad puns. He talks about dealing you in. Oh, it was just, it was, hey man, I know that you got your movie stolen from you and that you really had a lot planned on to do with this. So here, you just take all of that. You're going to get 4 minutes of screen time and you get to just pour it into that. All right. Are you ready? And Tatum looks at them and says, "You're goddamn right, I'm ready." No, you goddamn right, I'm ready, Freya. I have no idea how to do
I
the
don't
mush
even know.
mouth thing that he did.
Throw some marbles in your mouth and maybe you'll get there. Like, it was incredible. It was delightful. It was everything. Yeah, I mean, typically has a good run, but between X-Men 97 and this film
Oh,
appearance,
this is the year of Gambit.
having Gambit as part of the troupe that helps Wolverine and Deadpool get back to where they need to be to keep the movie going, etc. I mean, we barely touched on X-23.
Yeah, I was just thinking we hadn't mentioned her at all, and she was great. She was great in Logan. Having just watched this for the first time, let me tell you, I was impressed. It was amazing that with the performance that she did in Logan, and then to come back to that character so many years later and be aged up, it was really nice. And I didn't even have to wait those years to see her grow into this person. It was nice to see that character again. Laura's kind of cool. I wonder what she's been up to. Oh wait, but that was in the void, so she was technically dead. Aw. I think that's just about everything that we have to say about this. We had set out to record a 15-minute episode, and here we are at just over 1 hour of raw audio time. So goodness gracious, Tom, we had more thoughts about this movie than we thought we had. Thanks, everybody.